Welcome back to another episode of the Appraisal Doctor. Yes, I am outside again. There's something about nature that gives me life and makes me feel vibrant. If this is your first time on the Appraisal Doctor, welcome. And if you're a regular subscriber, welcome back. I am Dr. Aria A. Wilson, PhD in Urban Planning, Certified Residential Appraiser. For all your appraisal questions, this is where you come. Stick around for this week's episode. In this week's episode, we are looking at the simple question of how does an appraiser actually arrive at value when there are no comparables? A shorter way of asking the question, how does the appraiser know what method he is to use to come by value? How does the appraiser come by value? Now, the appraiser is a professional that is trained to approach valuations, appraisals, in a way that is both artistic and scientific. Let's look at the artistic angle. The artistic angle would be the angle of making adjustments whenever comparables are found to come by an opinion of value. In the residential scenario, for example, usually the approach to value is the market approach. So there are definitely situations where you can find sales in the market. So if it's an active market, there's going to be sales. And if there's going to be sales, we should be able to find comparables for our subject property. Usually we look in the subdivision first. If there is none in the subdivision, we look on the wider vicinity. Usually in a residential appraisal, we try to stay within a 1 mile radius with our comps. So, providing all things being equal, we should be able to find sales within a radius of 1 mile. If we find that we have a wide plethora of volume of sales that we need to narrow down, we normally narrow down with the radius. So we may go 1/4 of a mile out, 1/2 of a mile out, or a whole mile out. So the closer we are, it is deemed a better comparable. So that is in the market situation. But what happens? How does the appraiser problem solve when he has no recent transactions in the market? And this is usually the case in less urban residential communities, where you might be in a farm community where there are many people who own their homes along with farmland and they have no intention of reselling. This is their forever home. It may be a family home. It may be a family community, and there are not many transactions in the market. What does the appraiser do in a situation where he is limited in information? He is limited in transactions that are closed for the subject property. What does the appraiser do in this situation? So, this is where we have several approaches to value. So the first approach that I explained was what would happen in a perfect world, what an appraiser would consider beautiful grounds on which to do an appraisal, and he'd be smiling all the way, where he can find comps that are similar enough to his subject property. That's the perfect world, and for every appraisal, that is what an appraiser wants. Whether he's appraising a home, whether he's appraising an office place, an office complex, an office space, if he is appraising a retail shop, whatever it is, vacant land, a hotel, an airport. If he can find another airport that is within the same state or an airstrip within the same county, then he is onto something. So every appraiser would appreciate taking the market approach. But in the situation where there is limited market data, there are very limited transactions in that market, there has to be other options. The other options would be the cost approach. how much did it cost to build this property? And depending on the age, how much depreciation is going to be applied. That's a scientific part of the appraiser's job. This is where it's more mathematical. He now has to do some math to depreciate whatever he has gotten as the cost per square foot. Now, there are other professionals in the construction industry, in the real estate industry, in property industry overall, that their responsibilities are different things. And I speak to the quantity surveyor right now because the quantity surveyor's main task is to come by costing. How much does it cost to build? How much is it for a block? How much is it for tiles to tile a certain amount of floor area? How much is it for roofing? So the cost approach is usually informed by the quantity surveyor's reports. In Jamaica, we call them QSs. So the quantity surveyor, and in the scenario here in Texas, I think they're called engineers. Structural engineers are the ones that are expected to come up with a cost per square foot for particular types of construction. So depending on the construction type, it will inform the cost per square foot. This cost per square foot is what the appraiser uses to come by a value. Now, this value is actually a cost. It's not the most accurate, but in the situation where you have no market indicators, you don't have enough transactions in the market, then the next best step is to approach it from a cost approach. So the methodology would be using the cost approach. The cost approach, how much does it cost to build this house? How much does it cost to build this commercial property, or this shop, or this store, or this entire complex? And whenever you get that cost, you are now going to depreciate it by the age, the wear and tear, the condition, and the age of the property. And whatever you get at the end is usually added to the land value. You would have to do a search to find sales that are land only, lot sale, no building, no improvements, just bare land. When you find the property's land value, you're going to add it to the depreciated cost. So say your property is $10 a square foot, your property is 100 square foot, 100 times 10, your cost is $1,000. That $1,000 is depreciated by the amount of years. The depreciation is a calculation done with a percentage. That depreciation, if you're depreciating 10%, you're going to subtract 10% from the $1,000, leaving you with $900. Your value is $900 plus the lot value. So that is now your opinion of value according to the cost approach. I hope this is of good information to you. I have one more approach that I just want to mention before I close this video and this episode because I've given you a lot to think about. It's the income approach. The properties that are generating income, it is most pertinent to take the income approach. Now, do we want sales? As I mentioned before, it is always the best scenario for an appraiser to find comparable sales. So if I am doing an appraisal on an office complex and there are 6 spaces rented out to 6 different businesses, then there is income from 6 income streams. Now, even though there might be sales of another complex of 6 offices, there might be different terms and conditions that people have signed to in their leasing contract that differ. Now you need to compare like with like. So just getting a sales approach, even though it's appreciated, when it comes on to an income-bearing property, it serves the appraiser well. The appraiser will be more accurate if he approaches it from the income approach. So the methodology would be the income approach. What does that mean? It means that you're working in reverse. You are trying to figure out what the rent would be for similar spaces that are rented in the market. So that in and of itself is a type of market approach, but you are coming from the aspect of rent. So you have the sales price and you also have the income. The income, you wouldn't say income price, but you would say the rental income. So that rental income is multiplied by a yield. It's multiplied by a multiplier that reflects somewhat the interest rate. It's not necessarily the same as the interest rate. It's going to be mathematically, it really is, for this type of property, if it were sold, it would sell at this price. For this type of property, if it were rented, it would rent at this per annum. That property value over that income per annum gives you a multiplier. It gives you a fraction. It gives you a decimal. That decimal is called a yield. That yield is what is considered to be the rate in that particular market, and we generally call it the multiplier. So there's a whole different level of mathematics and calculation that takes place with coming up with yields, and this is usually used more in the commercial real estate market. The commercial real estate appraiser is the one that is more working with yields. I just wanted to explain a little bit that multiplier that is used to multiply by the rent takes that rental number into a capital value. It takes that rental number now into a sale price, an opinion of value for that property. So you are coming from a different avenue to come by the same opinion of value. So let's recap. How does an appraiser come to an opinion of value? Especially when he has no market evidence, whenever he does not have any market sales, comparables in the market to match his subject property. Number one, the ideal would be getting comparables similar to the property, especially in the scenario of a residential market. Number two, the cost approach is taken when there are no recent transactions, whether it is in a residential market or a commercial market. So the next best thing usually is the cost approach, if it's not an income-bearing property. Now, if it's an income-bearing property, it is still going to be a market value derived if you do the research and find out what the income level is, the rental income level is in that market, multiplied by a yield that's appropriate to reflect the same market, you are now going to end up with a mathematical answer that equates to the opinion of value using the income approach. So the income approach, the cost approach, the market sales comparable approach. Those are the three main approaches that the appraiser uses to come up with his opinion of value. I hope this is of good information for you. I hope I did not confuse you. Feel free to ask any questions you may have in the comments section, and I will be happy to explain further. Thank you for staying with me on this episode of the Appraisal Doctor. See you in the next one. If you are not yet subscribed, please consider subscribing to the Appraisal Doctor, and we can tackle these questions together.